Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Welch. I'm a third grade teacher in the state of North Carolina. And today I'm going to be answering the question, how can I get my students to love to read? Stay tuned. So, I'm going to share with you nine strategies of what I'm going to do in the classroom next year to help my students really love reading. And if you see me kind of looking to the side, I'm just referring to my notes because I don't want to miss anything. Number one, what I'm going to be doing in the classroom this year, a 30 book reading challenge. And you might say, why 30 books? 30 books is a lot. Or maybe you would say, 30 books is not that much. That's not much of a challenge. Well, let me explain. So, first of all, I'm going to be doing different types of genres with my 30 books. And so, for example, I have my students doing two historical fiction or two fantasy, five traditional literature books, which include fairy tales, folk tales, myths. I'm having my students do different nonfiction books. I think it's like five informational text, two biographies slash autobiography. I've also given my students opportunities to be able to select their own genre, what they want to do. And so, anyway, though, just those numbers in general compiled to 30 books. Now, why I kind of think 30 books, third grade. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to require my students to mostly read chapter books. And for third grade, that is going to be a lot because the kids, they're coming into third grade. Some of them may never even have read a chapter book before. Some may. Second grade does introduce it, but it is something that is definitely going to be a challenge for a lot of my students. One thing I will probably do is to make it just a little bit more reachable is have my students have the ability to read picture books on some of the different genres, like for example with the informational and the traditional literature. Those are going to be more where students will be able to pick out genre books. And then also I will tell my students that if you see a picture book you really like and it is maybe, like for example, a realistic fiction book, if you see one you really like and it is a good length, I will let you do it. So it all really kind of depends on that, but pretty much I'm sticking to the goals of you're going to be reading 30 chapter books, of course, minus the informational and the traditional literature. So, for the second one, genre discussion. Now, I have never intentionally done this in the classroom. I have talked about genres when we go over books, but I've never fully given my students every genre at one time. I've pretty much kind of done it throughout the year randomly, not even really consistently. So, this year, my first week of teaching, I'm going to introduce two to three genres every single day. For example, we might do the first day, we'll do maybe fantasy, science fiction, traditional literature, and expose those students to the books or excuse me, examples of books and also what the description is. So that, and the reason why I'm doing this is because students are probably going to grasp onto a certain genre, especially by the end of third grade, because they will have experienced all of the basic genres and they will be able to see, oh, I really like this. Like, I like mysteries a lot. Mysteries really just, I just really enjoy mysteries. And so I'm going to be looking at mystery genres. And so I just want them to kind of narrow down what they really love so that, whenever they go to the library or a bookstore or go shopping online, that can be something that they can look for specifically. So Anyway, though, that is one of the reasons why I want to teach genres, and also because it's a good thing to know. They need to be able to identify a fantasy from an historical fiction. So, one thing that I am going to do at the very end, I'm going to have my students, I'm going to give my students books, baskets of books, and they're going to have to decide what genre is in those baskets of books. And of course, some will be easy, like if you have a basket of mysteries, you're pretty much going to know it's going to be a mystery, right? Because of the title. But for example, if it's maybe realistic fiction versus, oh, I don't know, maybe sci-fi, maybe you would have to do a little bit of debating. But anyway, though, I moved classrooms last year and my books are in a mess. So when I get back into the classroom, I'm going to organize it before the kids come. But I'm not going to label them. So I'm going to let students do that. So I'm really excited about that because I think that will give them more ownership. They'll be able to see what kinds of books I have, think in their mind what kind of books I might want to check out, which gets me to number 3, which is my reading journal that we're going to do. Now, one of the things with a reading journal, this is my first time doing one. I've done an ELA journal before, but I've always had a reading log. And so this is what the reading log is going to be housed in the reading journal, but there's going to be other things as well. For example, I will include, we're going to be doing a lot of cutting and pasting on the first few days of school because I'm going to give my students papers. They're going to paste it into their reading log. One of the first ones is, of course, obviously going to be their genre list and the list of expectations so that students can refer back to it. And then secondly, I'm going to have a list of the genres with blank lines and descriptions, basically so that students will be able to write down what each one, like science fiction. What does science fiction mean? They'll have to write it down when we go over it and then write some examples down. So this is a way for them to reference back to the genre, like what is a genre? What are some examples, while they are on their own, so they don't forget that information. And then after that, it's going to be their reading log where they are going to write down the name of the book they're reading. One thing that I'm going to do that's not always, it's not a, something that's usually not on a reading log. There's a little blank section where they have to write about where they stopped at. And then there's another section where they can write, or they have to put a C or an A. C stands for completed and A stands for abandoned. So if they abandon the book, of course it won't count toward their final, but I am going to give my students, or excuse me, I'm going to give permission for my students to abandon a book, because we all know, if we are book readers, we know that sometimes we read books where you don't really want to finish it. It's not going anywhere for you. And so I'm giving my students permission to abandon their books. So anyway, though, that is pretty much going to be my reading journal. There's going to be a lot of blank pages in there for students to fill up. I will be asking questions about the books they're reading. We'll take it as we go. This is something new for me, and I know I'll be looking back at the very end of the next year and thinking, wow, I made a lot of mistakes, but I did learn from a lot as well. So anyway, though, going on to number 4, time to read in the classroom. This is something that I've struggled with a lot over the past few years. If a student is reading a book, are they really reading, or are they just looking like they're reading? I don't know. And so I've tend to stay away from just having them pull out a book and read. Typically, I have them go to the computer and they're doing some kind of educational website that I can kind of check up on. But I'm going to try it this year. I'm going to have my students have a book. They should have a book at their desk at all times. That's going to be the guideline rule for this year. And what we're going to do is, if you're finished with an assignment, you can read your book for a few minutes. So what I would like to do is be able to give students that opportunity to read in the classroom during the time when they are finished, because realistically, we are constantly doing something in the classroom. And whenever students do have a free moment, It's not that much. And it would be better to go ahead and read a book instead of wasting time logging onto a computer where they're technically only going to spend probably 10 minutes on it, if that much at all. So why not read a book, and then they can get a little bit further in that book. And then one thing that I've heard people say, as I have researched, is that if they read more at school, they will read more at home, because they are going to really, let's say they really like they're really enjoying the book, or they're at a spot where they have to finish it, and so they will read at home. So anyway, though, I'm hoping that that's kind of a twofold purpose. So not only are they reading whenever they finish work, but at the very end of the day, I'm going to set aside 30 minutes, and we are going to read, and then we're going to write about what we read. For the probably first couple of months of school, I'm going to do it where we're reading a book together, but we're pretty much reading it for enjoyment. And we'll do a little bit of writing at the very end of that amount of time. One thing that I would like to do is, whenever we do reading, I will either be reading whole group, or they'll be reading with partners, but it will be the same book. But after that, I'm probably going to let them read independently, depending on how my class does. And we'll just kind of go from there. I'll be recording as I go through my year, because I will be constantly reflecting on how we can get better and how we can do better with what we're doing. So, number 5, weekly conferences. So, in order to keep my students accountable and to make sure that they are working toward their 30 book reading challenge, we will be having weekly conferences. I plan to do it on Fridays, because Fridays are mostly it's going to be a big catch-up day for us. So either Fridays, or maybe in the morning time, if students come in early, I'll be able to catch up with them on their book. And pretty much what it's going to be about, it's like, what are you reading? Tell me a little bit about it. Are you liking it? Would you rate it 5 stars? Have you read any books that you've completed? And then, tell me about that. And so every book, and this is my plan, every book that they do read, they're going to have to write a letter to me in their journal telling me what the book is about, without giving away any plot twist. So, or any kind of any kind of spoilers. So we'll see how it works. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a lot of reflecting, and we'll see what we can do better on. Number 6. So, reading with my students. And this is what I'm planning on doing. I'm going to do a journal myself, and I'm going to do exactly what my students are doing. I'm going to be doing the 30 book challenge as well. I'm going to be reading books that they're going to be reading, so on their reading level. And I plan to read more books in my classroom. I have so many books in my classroom. I have over 1,600 books, and it's growing. It grows a lot. We'll say I am a book fanatic, and I have not read all of them. Of course, I know most of the authors. I know that they are books that are age appropriate, but I have not read all of them. So that is my plan to do, is to work through that journal with my students. And I'm also going to be able to talk to my students clearly and honestly about what books I am enjoying, so that students can get ideas from me as well, and they can see my love and passion for reading. Because if you are a teacher, you know that if students are watching you and you are really doing, you are really authentic and honest, students are going to be able to pick up on that. So anyway, though, that is number 6. Number 7 is work on getting more books for your classroom. I'm really obsessed with books. It's probably a me problem, but I would just give a few tips on how you can successfully get more books without it being too expensive for you. Number one is check out your school library. If students are requesting books that you do not have and the library does not have, they can advocate for themselves, or you can advocate for them by going to the library and asking if there's extra funds to be able to buy these books. Typically, librarians, if there are funds and they know that students are interested in them, they will try to make the effort to buy that book for the library. And so the student will be able to check it out. So, first I would make that your first step. If you're kind of a bookworm like me and you want it for yourself, you can go to your used bookstores in your area. I love to go to Second and Charles and Mr. K's bookstore, but those happen to be in my area, so they're easily accessible to me. But typically, used bookstores will allow you to bring books in, and they'll give you trade credit, which means that you'll be able to use that money that they give you or trade credit toward books that you want from that bookstore. So it will not end up costing you as much. I had a bunch of books that I went through my own personal library at home that I wanted to get rid of. I went to Mr. K's and I ended up bringing out a stack of books that I didn't have to pay a thing for because I had trade credit. So that's a good way for you to be able to utilize that. Ollie's is another one that does have books for less expense. A lot of times their books are maybe not up to par with some of the books that you can get elsewhere, maybe not current books is what I mean. But I was able to find a set the other day called the Baby Mouse series. And I remember a student of mine really enjoying that last year. So I went ahead and just bought the whole set. It was very cheap. I looked it up on Amazon. I think it was like $54 and I got it for $9. So, I mean, look for your deals. And, Thrift Books is another really good website to find books, especially if you're looking for a particular book, because they do tend to have, especially books that maybe have a few years under them. And maybe, you have like 5 to 10 years old, they tend to have more books at a reasonable price. You may have to pay a little more. Typically, it's about $5 per book, but sometimes you might have to pay a little more or maybe even a little less, depending on the type of book. And then lastly, this is specifically for teachers. There is a website called The First Book, and I will link that website down in the description below. But it is a website that if you are a Title I school, they will actually give you money, not money. They will actually discount books for the Title I school. So it's certainly something, if you're able to get that done, or if you are a Title I, if your school is Title I would definitely recommend that website to your librarian, or maybe you would like to purchase from it. So, they were like, for example, I will say I bought a set of the One and Only Bob books, and that was a couple of years ago, but I was able to get a whole class set of books. I think it was like 18 books for $90. And I know I'm crazy, right? For spending my own money, but that is pretty cheap because a hardback book, beautiful hardback books for that amount was very well worth it. So check out your resources. Number 8. So the finger strategy. One of the ways, and I'm going to teach this to my students at the very beginning of the year. One of the ways that you select a book is you use your fingers, and you can turn to any page in the book that you want to. But number 1, is there one word I did not understand? That is a great book for you. You're going to be able to read this book successfully. Are there 2 words I didn't understand? That's still pretty good. 3 words, you'll you're probably going to need a little help with that one, but you may still be able to read it by yourself with a little bit of help. Number 4, you're going to need a lot of help. And then number 5, you really need to pick out a different book because it is going to be too difficult for you to comprehend. And so that is a good way for students to be able to sift through your books. And if they find a book that, they like, then have them use the hand strategy to make sure that it is appropriate enough for them to be able to read. And then number 9, my last one, is posters. So I'm one that really has to be careful what I put on my wall because I don't want my wall to be so distracting for students. And that's a me thing personally. I have heard from people before that too much stuff on the walls can get very distracting to like ADHD students. So I try to be conscientious of that for them. But that is a me thing. I'm certainly not criticizing any teachers who do put a lot of stuff on their walls because I love to look at classrooms when I go into anyone else's classroom, and my eyes typically gravitate to the walls. So one of the things that I would like to do though is to have basically a chart where students have their name and then they have a list of the books they have read on top of their name. And by books, I mean like little bookends. They're just going to be very simple, rectangular. I'll show you a little picture of what one of them looks like. I guess I should be doing it this way so I have more room. But anyway, though, I'm going to have them write down the name of the book they've read when they have completed it and when they've proven that they've completed it by whether it's a journal entry, whether it's orally talking to me. Like I said, I'm going to work that out as I go along. So anyway, though, it's going to have I'm hoping to have a stack of books by the end of the year. And when I say I'm hoping, I'm going to tell my students that my expectation is 30 books. And I'm really hoping that some of my kids will exceed those expectations and even do better. So anyway, though, those are my 9 strategies that I plan to use in the classroom. I'm really excited about how it's going to work because, like I said, this is something that I have never done before intentionally. Of course, I've encouraged my students to read. And of course, I've encouraged my students like, oh, this set of books is really good. Oh, I encourage you to read this set of books. But I have never been intentional and had an intentional plan. So anyway, though, I hope this really helps. Please, please like my channel. I'm a brand new YouTuber. And one of the reasons that I've started a YouTube account is so that I can share my opinions, share my ideas with other people who have a passion and love for teaching and for helping children to learn and grow. So please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and I will see you next time on Spectacular Students.